Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you have a unique experience you'd like to share as a guest. Podmatch helps you connect with guests and hosts who have similar interests, experiences, and goals, making sure that each connection is meaningful and impactful. Thanks to Podmatch, I've connected with parents and caregivers worldwide and supported them in sharing their stories on Quiet Connection. If you'd like to check them out, visit www.joinpodmatch.com/Quiet Connection Podcast and learn more. Hi, welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. This week, Emily, a trauma recovery coach, shares her journey of healing from a traumatic childhood and how it has impacted her experience of motherhood. She highlights the significance of taking care of yourself and communicating effectively in order to meet your needs as a mother and provide a secure and supportive atmosphere for your children. Here's Emily. Hello. Today I am here with Emily. Emily, how are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on here and thanks for being flexible. You are an author. Mm-hmm. You are a podcast host. I could go down my list, but I think it would be much better coming from you if you want to sort of tell us a little bit about yourself. And then I also like to add who you were before you became a parent.
Oh, man. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Cleghorn. I wrote a book called Rising from the Ashes, Reclaiming Your Life After a Traumatic Childhood. I am the host of the Motherhood After Trauma podcast. I'm the mom of two beautiful little ones and a wife to my best friend, as cliche as that might sound. And together we have a farmstead. So I'm also a goat mom, a chicken mom, a duck mom, and a rabbit mom.
Oh my gosh. My kid would love it at your house.
Yeah, it's a bit of a show.
Yeah. So tell me about who you were before your two beautiful kiddos and your animals and all of this loveliness.
So before I became a mom, I was a elementary school teacher in the public school system in Alberta. I taught in the classroom. Before I had my daughter, I was in my grade 5 classroom for 5 years. After I had my daughter, I went back to school early because that's where I wanted to be. And things changed in that process, but I taught second grade for a year. I went in the middle of a school year, left in the middle of a school year for maternity leave again. And after my son was born, I said, no, I can't go back. I've got to make this business thing that I want to achieve work so that I don't have to go back. Yeah, I was a teacher. I was blissfully unaware of my trauma. I was trying to avoid all of it. I was subscribed to the checklist of life: go to school, get a job, get married, have kids. You know, that the checklist.
Were kids always on your checklist?
My checklist, personally, no, because of the trauma I experienced as a child and my experiences growing up. I decided in my teenage years that I didn't want to have kids because I didn't want to bring them into that kind of a scene. No child asks to be traumatized or neglected or abandoned or any of those things, and I wasn't going to bring a kid onto the scene to do that. However, when I met my husband, when we were dating and he told me he wanted 3 kids, I was like, oh, we'll see about that.
Changes some things.
Yeah, that changes a few things. So I was like, maybe we can compromise. One and done. And then we had our daughter, and I was like, well, what if something happens to us? Like, she's going to be all alone in the world. We can't let that happen. So
I was talking to somebody else this morning who said, like, the minute you decide to become a parent, you're not in, like, all of your plans go out the window. You are no longer in control.
Pretty much.
So obviously you wrote your book, Reclaiming Your Life After, or Rising from the Ashes, Reclaiming Your Life After a Traumatic Childhood. Is that something that you want to talk about a little bit as it applies to your journey into motherhood?
Yeah. So when I became a mom for the first time, when my daughter was born, I was completely unaware of how my traumatic childhood would play into my transition into mamahood. And I was like 3 or 4 days postpartum, and I say I was hit by the trauma bus. All of the repressed emotions and feelings, and I'm sure the postpartum hormones didn't help anything, but my fight or flight response was jacked and I was ready to run. However, being a child who was abandoned by their mother, I knew I'm a living example of what that causes. And I didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that, like, even in that darkness, I knew that I either could listen to that and deal with the fallout of that for the rest of my life, or I could stay and fight and heal, because my daughter deserved better, my husband deserved better, I deserved better. And so I chose to fight. And it took a long time for me to admit to somebody other than myself what I was dealing with. I suffered in silence for a really long time. My husband kind of knew that something was up, but I wouldn't admit it to him. I hated being a mother at first. Absolutely hated it. And I thought that that made me a horrible mother. I thought that it made me a horrible person, because achieving the pregnancy that resulted in my daughter was not an easy thing. I struggled with infertility, which I later learned was connected to my trauma because of my stress response. And when cortisol is being produced, other hormones are not. And so I worked really hard to achieve that pregnancy and have it result in a healthy baby. And then I get her in my arms and I absolutely hated everything about it. So over the last 5 years, it's really been a journey of discovering why, first of all, why I hated being a mother. And I come to find out that when you reflect on your experience as a child with female role models, mother figures, that shapes your view of what moms are, what moms do. So the majority of my experience with mother figures was moms abandoned, moms hurt, moms flake, moms don't love you unconditionally, and they only show up when it's convenient for them. So, of course, I don't like being a mother if that is my view of what a mother is.
Yeah.
Or what a mother does. So, it's been a huge healing journey. And so I even changed the terminology that I use around mom or motherhood. I say mamahood because the connotation it's a little lighter, it's a little softer, and the association in my brain is different than motherhood or mom or, So with the writing of my book, I took the approach of giving my readers the little stepping stones that I picked up in those early days. Okay, so what do I need to do to overcome my traumatic childhood so that I can show up for my daughter at the time and later for my son as well in a way that is a stark contrast to my experience as a mom or being a child with a mom. So things like believing in yourself and owning your worth and setting boundaries. And this one is a little bit of a hot topic in the trauma space, forgiveness. I speak about forgiveness from a perspective of you can forgive someone without talking to them, first of all. And your forgiveness of them is not letting them off of the hook. It's letting you free.
Yeah.
So the book is less about my story and more about what I learned as I went through and healed some of my trauma. And when I released the updated second edition of the book back in September of 2023, I also created a workbook to go along with it. And the workbook is where you, as a reader, get to take what I'm saying in the book and apply it. And see the transformation start to take place.
Yeah. I love that. And you're like your bio says, you're a trauma recovery coach.
Yeah.
How did you come to that? So you went through your own recovery and healing and all of that process. How did you next take that step and say, okay, I'm going to take what I learned and what I gained from my experience and start helping others?
Yeah. So when I was a little girl, I remember this as if it were like yesterday. I was walking into an appointment with my child psychologist. And I remember walking through that parking lot, mid 90s, and I remember thinking to myself, no kid deserves to be treated poorly because their mommy or daddy don't know how to love them. Someday, when I grow up, I'm going to help kids like me. Now, at that point, I had no idea what that was going to look like. For a long time, I wanted to be a child psychologist, but then I got into high school and realized how much schooling a child psychologist requires. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of schooling. So I changed my path and decided to become an elementary school teacher. And that was great. And elementary school teachers do a lot and they don't get the credit that they deserve.
Oh,
but
yeah.
They work within a lot of restraints and the red tape is thick and heavy. So I like teaching. Like I still have a tutoring business, even though I'm not in the classroom, and I love teaching kids how to read. But I wasn't able to help create the impact that I wanted to in a public classroom. So when I was on my mat leave after my son was born, I discovered the world of life coaches. And I think I remember there was a show back in the early 2000s. I think I remember it. It was these two life coaches, and they took on clients, and it was like at a retreat or something. I don't remember the name of the show. Anyway, I I didn't think that was like a real job at that point. But but I was like, wow, those people are really like changing the lives of these people if it's real. And so I discovered that I could take what I was passionate about, helping kids like me, although 3 years ago, 5 years ago, they're now adults. Those kids like me are now adults like
Mm-hmm.
me. So I reconnected with that dream that I had as a little girl of helping kids like me. And I found a coaching certification program that gave me the tools that I needed to pair with what I already knew and create a program, which I called the Mended Mama Academy, to help trauma surviving mamas who are navigating their triggers, because motherhood is hella triggering.
Oh, yeah.
Help them to untrigger their triggers and become the mama that they needed that perhaps they didn't have.
I love that. I think that that resonates so much with me, not for the same reasons, obviously. Like I didn't have a mama or a mother who had abandoned me or things like that, but I took my experiences and my birth trauma and my mental health trauma and decided to turn it into something to help the people like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely resonates with me. And I love that you had that thought at such a young age
Mm-hmm.
to just be like, this isn't right. And I'm going to make sure I do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I was doing a project. I believe I was in 8th grade. And I was looking at the statistics for kids who grow up with traumatic events in their past. And I remember looking at those statistics because they're high. Kids who grow up in a traumatic environment are hugely susceptible for being in traumatic events in adulthood. And I remember in 8th grade looking at those statistics and putting a stake in the ground saying, I am not going to be one of those statistics. That is not for me.
I love that.
So this is a thing that I have made a decision. It's been a mission on my heart since I was a little girl. And it's just been unfolding a lot since I became a mama.
Yeah. I also love I'm trying to like intentionally use mother and mama in the same way that you are, because the impact that those words have on you and to you and mean for you, it's very powerful. It's super powerful. And what I think too is a superpower of yours is you knew going into having kids that this is something that may come up for you, or maybe you didn't know it was going to come up for you, but it was something that was an active part of your life. You struggled. You struggled,
Mm-hmm.
but you did not become the statistic.
No.
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 It was hard and it
Oh, yeah.
wasn't what you hoped it would be, but you fought through it.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that helped you to get to, because like you said, you did not like being a mother. You hated it. You did not like it. I kind of want to dive into that a little more too. Like, what did that look like? What did that feel like? And then, of course, on top of that, like, what were the ways that you sort of fought through those impulses?
So, one of the things that I struggled with most at the beginning of my transition from just Emily to mama was I struggled with identifying where I stop and where my daughter started, or where my biological mother stopped and where I started. For me, having the realization that, first of all, I am not my biological mother. I am my own person who can make my own choices, who can choose a different path. I don't have to make the same choices that she made, whether or not they were the best for the situation back in the early 90s or not. Those were her choices. Here, now, these are my choices. And making that distinction was huge. When I realized that, okay, I am not her, I am me. I can make my own choices. It was like the fog lifted. So that was huge. And that was part of reclaiming my power. And that is something that I've discovered a lot of trauma survivors struggle with. Deciphering where you start and where you stop and where other people start and stop. That is a trauma thing. Another thing that really has helped me tremendously is journaling. For me, in my experience, verbalizing my feelings, my thoughts, has been met with gaslighting, making what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, invalidating my feelings, my thoughts. And so for me, one of the tools that my child psychologist gave me when I was a little girl going to a child psychologist, instead of verbalizing what I'm saying to people because it's scary or they're gaslighting or invalidating, is to write it down. So I have found immense healing in old school pen and paper. And that is my safe place. And I understand that for some people, journaling in that form is not a safe place because somebody somewhere along the line has violated your privacy. But there are many, many, many different ways to journal. For me, it's my safe place. When that pen is in my hand and I am allowing myself to just, whatever flows through the end of that pen is what it is. And I don't judge myself. Now, it's taken some time to get to this place of not judging what I'm writing, but I just let it flow through the paper. And there are some things that I have written in my journal that I would never in a million years verbalize out loud.
Yeah.
But getting them down on paper is so healing. It gets it out of your body. You're able to release the emotion that's attached to that thought, and you're able to heal. Something else, a third thing that's been incredibly helpful for me is intentional breathing. So for me and a lot of other trauma survivors, what we tend to do is we either hold our breath or we breathe too quickly. And our breath is shallow and like you're not getting the air down deep in your lungs. So for me, when my brain gets going a million miles a second and anxiety starts to crawl and I can't function, I will do, my favorite technique is called 5-5-7 breathing. So you exhale or you inhale for 5 seconds, you hold it for 5 seconds, and then you exhale for 7 seconds. And you do that. It's very similar to like box breathing or any of those other breathing techniques. But what it does is it tricks your brain into your parasympathetic state instead of your sympathetic state. And you're able to calm down and bring that stress response back down. I've also discovered the use of adaptogens. herbal adaptogens, ashwagandha is like an amazing supplement.
I've just barely gotten into ashwagandha, and it has made a huge difference.
Yeah, it's huge. So those are a few of the tools and techniques that I've found really helpful. Once you get into the habit of being able to identify when you're triggered, when you're feeling super anxious, and what's causing it, and you're able to bring yourself back down using tricks and techniques that you just have in your back pocket. You're building a toolbox of tools that you can use to untrigger yourself and teach your nervous system how to calm down, because you're safe, but it doesn't know that because your experience has not taught it what safe looks like or feels like. That those are some of the tools and things that I have discovered that are really, really helpful.
So you're not the first mama that I've talked to that has expressed the benefits of journaling.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's not for everybody. And I think a lot of moms would argue like, oh, well, I don't have time to journal, or like, there's never like, when am I going to do that? And to that, I hate saying it because it's so contradictive, but like, you have to make the time. You have to make the time. And whether it's making the time to journal, or whether it's making the time to actively give yourself 5 minutes to do some 5-5-7 breathing,
Mm-hmm.
or finding those grounding techniques and finding those things that are going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find them if you're not looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to work if you're not practicing them.
Mm-hmm.
I love hearing what worked for you, and it's so great because I love sharing it with my listeners, because you never know what's going to work for who, or you never know what's going to work for you.
Yeah, everybody is different.
Yeah.
And one of the objectives that I often hear is that if I take time for me, I'm being selfish.
Yeah, no.
Because I've got the kids to take care of, I've got the house to take care of, I've got this thing and that other thing, and everything is dependent upon me, and blah, 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 blah. No. If your children are a mirror to how you are feeling on the inside. So if I completely abandon myself and neglect my needs, my kids are going to show me how I'm feeling on the outside, on the inside, outside. So by me taking 5 or 10 minutes to spill the beans in my journal, I am showing them, I am actively demonstrating to my 5-year-old and my almost 4-year-old that it's important to take time for you. Because like, looking down the line, when my daughter is X number of years old and she's got kids of her own, I want her to know that it is okay for her to take time for herself and to take care of herself before she takes care of those kids. Obviously, if you're dealing with an infant, that's a different story. But when your kids are old enough to, take a seat, play with some toys, watch a cartoon, whatever you want them to do, it's okay to take a minute to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also argue, and again, easier said than done, but obviously when you've got a newborn, that's very, very different. You're in a very different place. But when your kiddo is like infant and above, like, crying is not going to hurt them. And if you are not in an okay headspace, or if you are being triggered by something, putting them in a safe space, like a crib or a swing, and literally just stepping away for 5 minutes is okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Especially if walking away for 5 minutes is going to prevent something from happening. Like, if you feel like you're going to snap and you're going to do something that's not okay, then you need to walk away. Make sure Junior is safe, but you need to walk away.
Yes. Yes. And I love too that, again, I say all of this with the caveat that it's so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
Because along with this comes the mom guilt and the shame and all of those things, like you were saying, like if I take time for myself, then I'm a bad mom. And you hear the phrase thrown around so much, like you can't pour from an empty cup. And that's great. And that's wonderful. But I think it's especially poignant coming from you because your experience as a child programmed you to have this vision of what a mom is or supposed to be. You found yourself feeling those things when you became a mama, but you were able to challenge them. You were able to use coping skills, and you were able to overcome that trauma. And I'm not saying that you're completely healed either.
Oh no,
like
healing is a journey. Healing is a journey. I don't know if anybody is ever completely healed. It's an evolution.
Right. But I think it's important for listeners to understand, like, this isn't like a lecture. This isn't like this is what you need to do. It's more of an example of it is possible.
It's totally
possible. And when you're in those moments, when you feel like this is the end, like I have nothing more to give, I don't know what life expects of me or why I'm feeling this way, I can't do anymore. It's like, okay, then that's the moment you take it minute by minute and you use your coping skills, and it is possible. Emily can do it. You can do it.
Yeah. And, for so long, I thought, well, if my parents would have just done this, if my parents would have just, parented me instead of giving me away, if somebody would have intervened when my stepbrother was abusing me or when my stepmother was abusing me, I wouldn't be dealing with this. But there is a point in time when you have to say, okay, yes, it would have been nice if those things happened, but they didn't. So what are you going to do? How are you going to respond? You can't change the past. What's done is done.
Right.
But you are responsible for how you heal and how you move forward. Your healing is nobody's responsibility except for you. It's your job. It's your responsibility. It's your life. Sorry if that's harsh, friends.
And that's not to say that you are not deserving of help. And that is not to say that you have to solve these problems on your own. If you're struggling with trauma, if you're struggling with triggers from PTSD, if you're struggling with a lot of what we talk about, postpartum mental health disorders, none of those things mean that you are wrong, or that there's something wrong with you, or that you are bad, or that and it means none of those things. And I think what you're saying when you say, like, it's up to you to decide how you move forward, that doesn't mean that you need to pick yourself up off the floor and grit your teeth and bear it.
No.
It means that you are worthy of help.
You deserve help.
And you deserve help to get better. And you can get better. You will get better. There will be better days.
Yeah.
There will be better days. And you said, for you, maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you said, like, it took you, like, that whole first year you were trudging through, like, I hate this.
No, it wasn't the entire first year. Well, I hate this was probably the entire first year. But I was suffering in silence for probably the first 3 months. Like, my husband asked me time after time after time, what's wrong? Like, I was bursting into tears for no apparent reason. And he was like, what is wrong? Like,
Yeah.
what do I do? Like he was helpless. And I remember like just breaking down in the truck, and we were on our way home, and our daughter was sleeping in the back seat because moving wheels were her kryptonite and nap time. Yes. But I was just like, I hate this. Like, I feel awful because we worked so hard to achieve her, and I love her, but I hate this.
Yeah, I've said it before. And I'll say it again. I'm at a different stage in my life now, and I don't feel this way as strongly now, but I would always, with my kids are 7 years apart. With my first, I hated being a mom, but I loved being my kid's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I loved her.
Oh, yeah.
But I hated being a mom.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with that. I would argue to say that it's probably normal because of the expectations of what a mom is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if a lot of us were being more honest with ourselves, I mean, this is not a fun job. It's the hardest job that you could possibly have.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you didn't have a good example set for you.
Well, yeah. I mean, motherhood on a good day is challenging, but motherhood when you've got trauma to work through is another ball game where there are baseballs coming at you from every direction.
Yes. One of my questions that I was interested to know is, how do you sort of on the daily get your needs met in terms of like when you're getting triggered?
Mm-hmm.
Because I assume it still happens from time to time.
From time to time.
How are you able to meet your needs while also staying present for your kids?
So in our house, communicating how you're feeling has become really important. So for me, it is really important for me to have my kids understand how they're feeling, acknowledging how they're feeling, and having compassion, not only for themselves, but for others, and empathy. Those pieces of emotional intelligence have been incredibly important. So for me, when I'm getting overstimulated or triggered, usually overstimulated comes before triggered. Sometimes they coexist. I will say, okay, guys, mommy is feeling anxious or I'm feeling overstimulated. It's too loud. Can we quiet down? Or mommy needs a minute to just go in the room, whether it's the laundry room or the porch or wherever it might be, and just breathe for a minute. So modeling that behavior, and my kids are now old enough that if they are feeling overstimulated or they need a minute by themselves to calm down, they'll come upstairs and they'll go in their bedroom and they'll calm down and then they'll come back downstairs.
Oh, I love that.
I just need a minute in my bed, mommy. I just need a minute in my bed. Okay, sweetheart, you go upstairs and when you're ready, mommy's right here. So modeling that has been huge. And sometimes, I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to say that I'm perfect and I have all my poop in a group. Sometimes a trigger will come up and I'll explode and I'll lose my mind. And in those instances, after we calm down, I'll come back to my kids and say, you know what? Mummy yelled. Mummy was really loud. And that's not how I should have handled it. And I'm sorry that I yelled.
Yeah, I think that's a difference in our generation. Again, I'm making an assumption, but I believe we're in the same sort of generation and trying to set these examples and model these behaviors for our kids that were not modeled for us. I mean, I don't want to overgeneralize either, but like our parents' generation, No one was teaching them these emotional skills either. So they obviously
No.
weren't sitting down with us and being like, it looks like you're having some big feelings. It was more like, could you stop crying?
What are you
Stop
crying
crying.
for?
What's wrong? Yeah, I'll
You
give
want to
you
cry? I'll
something
give
to
you
cry
something
about.
to cry about.
I feel like us millennials and elder millennials are really working hard on that emotional intelligence and those coping skills and modeling that for our kids. I
Mm-hmm.
commend you because it's made even more complicated when you come from a trauma background because you're
Mm-hmm.
working from a skill set of zero. You have to build that toolbox yourself. And you sort of already answered this question beautifully, but I guess I'll maybe try to dig a little bit deeper. Like, how do you approach the subject of mental wellness with your kids? And like, I don't know if they're old enough to have like a mental health conversation, but like, is it something that's openly discussed in your house?
Um, we haven't really talked a lot about mental wellness yet. My daughter's just starting kindergarten. So we'll talk about, well, how are you feeling? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling angry? Is there something that mommy can do to help you work through that? Just right now at this stage of the game, I am working on helping them to identify their big feelings because they are big.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I feel them and I'm like, what the? How do I work through this?
I can tell you it having so I have an 8-year-old and a 1-year-old, and the differences are crazy, but the similarities are also crazy. Like my 1-year-old's just barely starting to get into the tantrum phase where like she's
Oh
instantly
man.
just pissed off at the world and throws herself on the floor. But my 8-year-old's the same way, just in a
Mm-hmm.
different form of expression. If it doesn't work right
Mm-hmm.
away, it's the end of the freaking world.
Yeah.
So, yes, there's a lot of, and like you said, like something that was not modeled for us is that checking in after the fact.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when I do blow up, when I do get overstimulated, I come back later and I go, Mommy was really overstimulated and I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have handled it that way. And my 8-year-old is starting to do that now. She'll come back later and be like, I'm sorry. I was really hungry. I think that's why I was mad.
That is adorable. But that is so
Well,
powerful.
I think she hears me say it about my partner. I'm like, "Have you eaten? Cuz you're really grumpy." And so I think that she relates that and she's like, "I think I was really hungry cuz I was pretty grumpy."
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So, I don't know. I think it's just important to like a lot of what you're saying, give yourself grace, give
Mm-hmm.
yourself time, and invest in yourself enough to take care of your needs so that you can then take care of your kiddos' needs too.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup. And one thing I just wanted to add was like my my son's go-to response when he gets frustrated or upset is to scream. And I look at him and I'm just like, Mommy doesn't understand what you need when you scream.
Mm-hmm.
Can you use your words to tell me what you need? So, you know, it's not an overnight thing. It's it's a process that evolves, and over time my healing is demonstrating to my kids how to identify their emotions, how to cope with their emotions, how to communicate about their emotions. So, yeah, that's all I can really ask for. Like, I'm going to end up with some kids that are really aware about their emotions.
Yeah,
That's not bad.
which is I think no, I think that's what we're all trying to do right now. Especially with this whole with our pandemic era kiddos who have not had the opportunity to sort of we've all been so isolated and we can have these big feelings and but we don't know what to do with
Mm-hmm.
them and And yeah, learning how to identify them and identify them in other people. And it's made much more complicated for our kids, and we don't know what we're doing half the time either, but we're doing it every
making it up as I
day.
go.
Yes. So what I like to do at the end of my episodes is I ask one of two questions, and I usually don't decide beforehand. I usually let the conversation go where it goes, and then I'll make a decision. So I think I know which one I'm going to ask you. But before I do, this conversation has been really cool, and I feel like at times we've gotten like heated, but it's a good heated. It's like I said, I want to communicate to listeners. It's not a lecture. It's not a this is what you need to do. It's like we've been through some shit and I want you to know you're not alone and that you're worth the help and that it will get better. So there's that. The question that I think I will leave us on is, if you could go back in time, all the way back, and you can't tell yourself what you're going to experience or what you're going to endure, but you can instill something within yourself or arm yourself with something. It can be a word, it can be a phrase, it can literally be a feeling. What would you arm yourself with?
Give yourself grace. It's okay to not have all of the answers.
That's beautiful. And I will reiterate, with the give yourself grace, you're worth it. Yeah.
You are so worth it.
Well, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me, getting heated with me. Sometimes I really need that. I need that boost. And I told you before we started recording that I was like fried, and now I'm amped. So that's good. But I appreciate you relaying your story, talking about your trauma. And then I also commend you so much for putting in the hard work after becoming a mama to end the cycle, just to end the cycle with your kiddos. Yeah.
I wouldn't change anything about my transition into mamahood, my journey through mamahood thus far. I believe that I was given the experience in my childhood so that I could impact many, 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 many lives, not just the lives of my children, for the better. And so while it was a really crappy experience, I'm going to use it and claim victory over it and lift people up, because that's what our world needs. We need to be lifted.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing your story with me. I was especially interested in your definition of a mama versus a mom or mother. Listeners, you can find Emily on Facebook or Instagram at emily.cleghorn.coach. You can keep up with us on Quiet Connection by following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads at Quiet Connection or at Quiet Connection Podcast. You can help our community grow by leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider sharing our episodes on social media. To share your personal journey, you can contact us through our website at quietconnectionpodcast.com or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.